Good evening to my fellow students, staff, and all those others who are watching via the YouTube live stream. We are Team 2 to discuss SDG 11 and urban development. To go urban is to understand. I would like to introduce my wonderful teammates, me, Elyna Camus, Irene Pae, Jahanara Mariya Tigley, Judy Dam, Mariya Caliah Rosario, and Tan Mai Nguyen. For the progression of this presentation, here is the table of contents. So we will be talking about the introduction to SDG 11 and urban development, green energy and urban development, the social implications of urban development, innovative solutions and action plans, and finally, our overall conclusion and final statement. Before we officially begin, let us watch this short video to better understand what is urban development.
We're urbanizing at well over 1 million people a week. That means that every 2 months, there's the equivalent of a New York metropolitan area being erected on this planet. 100 million, or Mexico City, 100 million.
The economy will double in the next 20 years, and the infrastructure needs for economic development are just enormous. You can't do really economic development without infrastructure.
People now know what other people have in other parts of the world, and everybody wants that, and governments need to rise to the challenge.
If you talk to a developing country, what they'll say is they need foreign investment. I mean, where's the investment going to come from?
Well, there's a lot of short-term liquidity in the market. Long-term capital is still very difficult to get to commit.
We've got to bring in new investors. They've got to see that infrastructure is a major part not only of their investment portfolio, but of developing the economy.
The whole point of having a city, the whole point of all that infrastructure is a way of bringing people together, create new things, and in particular create wealth.
Governments, I think, are beginning to understand that they have to put in place policy measures, guarantee systems. Nobody's got the answers yet, but there's a lot of thinking going on.
The most important thing is cooperation. World Economic Forum can facilitate cooperation, collaboration among governments, the private sector.
Construction organizations, development organizations, companies like ourselves in the real estate sector who have an intellectual property in this area.
Looking at case studies of what has worked and what has been very successful, and then helping people become aware and sharing best practice and be an advocate of the necessary changes that need to take place.
Probably going to be technical solutions, and we're the folks that can provide technical solutions.
You know, it's such an extraordinary.
Now that we have an idea of what is urban development, I would now like to call on Jahanara to now introduce us to SDG 11 and urban development.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Today, I'd like to bring your attention to Sustainable Development Goal 11, or SDG 11 for short. It is a crucial global initiative established by the United Nations to create inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable cities and human settlements by 2030. Urbanization is rapidly changing our world, with super cities surpassing 40 million inhabitants and various other urban formations emerging. As highlighted by William Robert Avis, urban development encompasses the social, cultural, economic, and physical aspects of cities, as well as the underlying causes driving these processes. Robert Muga further emphasizes the emergence of supercities and other urban collections. SDG 11 acknowledges the pressing need to tackle the complex challenges associated with urban development. It aims to promote inclusive cities that offer equal opportunities to all residents, ensuring safety through resilient infrastructure and crime prevention measures. Additionally, it focuses on environmental sustainability by reducing pollution and enhancing resilience to climate change. In conclusion, SDG 11 provides a framework for transforming our cities into vibrant, harmonious communities that meet the ends of present and future generations. Thank you for your attention, and let us all play our part in achieving SDG 11 and building a better world.
Now I would like to talk about green energy and urban development. Firstly, let's define what green urban development is. To quote Jan Gill, an endless number of green buildings does not make a sustainable city. Then what exactly is urban development? Actually, it's the method of planning cities in order to cut waste and emissions, use sustainable construction materials, and minimize the use of energy and water. However, there are a lot of problems that come with this kind of development. Nowadays, due to the increasingly high cost of energy due to conflicts happening in Russia and the Middle East, it has been difficult for countries to maintain green urban development. In particular, developing countries who already have a lot to improve in, like Afghanistan and the Pacific Islands, sustainable urban designs are likely to be the least of their worries, as they are currently being heavily impacted by much worse problems, such as warfare or climate change. Hence, the resources and investment from the government is not enough for them to completely change urban infrastructure. In addition, some metropolitan cities with dense populations, like Shanghai or Mumbai, due to the lack of careful city planning, are not able to fit much parkland or walkways in their city, as this was not something they considered when first designing the cities. City leaders need to emphasize green urban development when they're first thinking of how to structure the city, so that there is enough parkland and space for multiple public transportation routes. Next, here are some of the statistics related to green urban planning. Globally, on average, only 9.8% of urban areas are dedicated to parkland. At least 33% of waste is mismanaged globally through open dumping or burning, and its numbers actually tripled in the US, with 90% of solid waste going to landfills. Cities consume 78% of the world's energies and produces more than 60% of greenhouse gas emissions. Now I'll introduce you 4 examples of cases. 2 of good green urban developments, and the other 2 have some improvements to make. Our first example is Singapore, one of the most developed and eco-friendly cities in Asia. They have 2 types of public transportation, bus and railways, and making them rank first in the world according to McKinsey's Urban Transportation Report. Hence, private transportation is used less due to the limited land space on the island country. As for its park areas, Singapore has many parks of various sizes throughout the city, notably the Singapore Botanic Garden and Gardens by the Bay. This garden is a mini central park consisting of several hundred acres of cultivated parkland in downtown Singapore, been called one of the world's most spectacular urban developments with numerous flower plant species from around the world. Additionally, city leaders are planning to evolve other copious areas into therapeutic gardens for the elderly, part of the country's 2030 Green Plan. Our second good example is Berlin, Germany. With many open spaces and city parks, this city is perfect for those wanting to take endless strolls around the vintage architecture that it displays, with the total parkland area adding up to nearly 8,000 acres of parkland. It also offers several public transportation choices for residents and visitors, including trains, subways, bus, and trams, making it come in 9th in Statista's public transport ranking list. And finally, the city has some of the lowest rates of per capita water usage in Europe, with involvement in the sustainable management of its water basins and implementing eco-services to ensure water replenishment. Now, our first not-so-good example is, shockingly, New York City in the United States. Despite a high recycling percentage, the Big Apple failed to meet the most basic standard, which is producing less waste. According to the Grow New York City, in 2019, its residents produced 12,000 tons of water every day, which is often piped to nearby landfills. As for solid waste, it produced 33 million tons of waste a year, which is twice as much garbage as any other city on Earth. Furthermore, the city is facing a big air pollution issue in the past few weeks, with over 22.5 million residents in its metropolitan area exposed to unhealthy air. The city ranks 14th for cities with the most ozone pollution in the United States. Our second negative example is Mexico City, the capital of Mexico. Although recycling initiatives have been launched, the city still largely relies on private waste management, with only 10% of the city's waste being recycled. Additionally, the city is a significant contributor in Mexico's greenhouse emission chart, with 60 million tons of carbon dioxide released per year, and closely follows New York City in second place. These 2 cities are some of the biggest in their country and region, with developed public transport and a lot of parkland for New York City. Yet they aren't able to manage waste properly, hence forcing their citizens' health to be significantly damaged. In the end, you can see that although green urban development has become much more common and much more developed, not all of its intended goals are being maintained, showing some improvements to be made. Next, Elyna will introduce some of the social implications of urban development. specifically inequality between the rich and the poor.
Thank you, Mai. Now, I shall be talking about the second aspect of urban development that needs to be highlighted, which is the topic of the social implications of urban development. Part of the goals carried by the application of urban development in country societies involves the eradication of poverty as much as possible. For many years, the processes of urbanization have been designed to provide comfortable and safe homes and cities for people to live and thrive in. However, even if there is the initiative for urban development to become one of the sure ways to lift people up in terms of their state of living, modes of urbanization in many nations may still be lacking in terms of their balanced and equal accessibility to all social classes. In relation to this, there is the underlying fact that the countries who majorly need to be urbanized are those who do not have the opportunity to do so because of their inaccessibility to the necessary resources. Although more than half of the world is already undergoing urban development, can we really say that the urbanization of the world is absolutely progressing as well as we envision it to be? So to dive more deeper into this, let's dive into the statistics of urban development. So according to the statistics, 55% of the world is urbanized. Is that a good thing? Well, maybe. Looking at it on a surface level perspective, we can deduce that urban development is prominent in more than half of the world. However, looking beyond what we can comprehend from numbers and percentages, is it still really an absolutely good thing? There is still more and more room for countries to improve their urban development processes in order to provide for all people, whether rich or poor, the most efficient and sustainable homes and cities. Additionally, 1 out of 4 people in urban dwellers in many countries, which is approximately 1 billion people, are still living in slums. Now, let's also dive into the good application of urban development and those countries that may also need improvement. For the good application of urban development, we have 2 countries. First is Switzerland. The degree of urbanization in Switzerland from the years 2011 to 2021 is from 73.63% to around 74%. Although there's no drastic change over the years, we can still say that urbanization in Switzerland is still going as high as possible to accommodate really a lot of people in urban areas and cities. And additionally, 8.5% of the people in Switzerland, which is around 772,000 citizens, live in poverty in 2020. Compared to the percentage rate of urbanization, that is very little compared to that. So we can really say that Switzerland is doing a pretty well job in order to make sure that a lot of areas are being urbanized well to accommodate a lot of people. Now we have Netherlands. The degree of urbanization in the Netherlands from years 2011 to 2021 is from 87.88% to 92.57%. We can really see a significant change in the duration of those years in how Netherlands has been able to urbanize their areas. The Netherlands is also known for its innovative approaches to urban development and has been successful in implementing multiple initiatives focusing on the needs of the people. Now let's go to the countries who may need a bit more improvement in their urbanization. First, we have the Philippines. The degree of urbanization in the Philippines from the years of 2011 to 2021, that's about 10 years, is from 45.52% to 47.68%. In those duration of the years, although there's no significant change, just like in Switzerland, Philippines is still kind of a long way to really being urbanized. The degree of urbanization as seen here in the statistics is less than half. So the country has a long way to go for it to really be urbanized efficiently and sufficiently for the people. Additionally, about 4.5 million people in the country are homeless or living in informal settlements. Additional to this, the Philippines is also considered as one of the most disaster-prone countries in Asia. The country experiences an average of 20 typhoons per year. The after effects of such disasters greatly affect families and households who belong in homes in areas that aren't well protected and taken care of. Hence, Since the Philippines, since majority of the areas in the Philippines are filled with those informal settlers or people who live in slums, there is a need to really be more innovative and to really improve the urbanization in the country. Finally, another country that would somehow need improvement in their urbanization as well is Africa. The degree of urbanization in Africa from year 2011 to 2021 is 36.54% to 41.83%. So we can see a change in those percentage rates. However, just like in the Philippines, it is still majorly less than half of the country that is still urbanized. And additionally, adding the poverty rates of African countries, getting the total of all poverty rates, approximately 60.7% of Africa lives in poverty. So if we are going to compare the percentage rates of poverty and urbanization, we can really see that in the entirety of Africa, majority of Africa is still living in poverty. So there's a really need for African countries to somehow be more sufficient, efficient, and resilient in establishing urbanization in their countries. Now, as we move on to the innovative solutions and action plans, I would now first like to call on Judy.
Okay, thank you very much, Elyna, for your informative sharing. And now I'll be talking about some of the green initiatives that we could adopt in urban planning. First, let's dive deeper into our first recommendation, which is mainly about the urban parks and gardens. By increasing the number and the size of these green spaces, we can create a vibrant and interactive environment that offer the urban citizens accessible area for recreation, for relaxation, and community engagement. And before you is the picture featuring a majestic lion. So do you recognize what country is that? It's Singapore. So Singapore is kind of popular in its innovative approach to urban planning and the transformation of the city into a captivating garden city, which is the nickname of Singapore. So that's why we decided to choose Singapore as the prime example of the initiative of urban parks and gardens. And these green spaces not only provide respite from the bustling city, but also foster a sense of community and connection with nature. Our next recommendation is to encourage the installation of green roof and walls on the buildings to maximize the green space, and especially in those areas who have the dense urban area. And the installation provides substantial advantages, including helping us to regulate building temperatures as well as reducing the energy consumption. Green roof and walls provide refreshing oases and create more comfortable microclimate for the citizen in the urban area to enjoy. Right here, we have the picture right next to this section to illustrate what we mean. Can you take a guess at what location it is? The flag says it all. It's Vancouver, Canada. And this place is called the Vancouver Convention Center. And as you can see, there are greenery on top of the center, and which not only benefits the overall environment of the place, but the structure of green roof enhance the aesthetic building appeal of the building. And next, we always support with the widespread adoption of renewable energy sources. For example, the solar panel, the wind energy, the geothermal system, and many more. So by embracing these sustainable alternatives, we can shake off the reliance and dependence on fossil fuels, like the gas or like the oil, as well as decreasing our carbon footprint and promote a healthier environment. Next, one of the most fascinating recommendations on our list, which is the vertical farming. So basically, vertical farming allows the people to integrate food production in our urban landscapes, utilizing the techniques. For example, we have the hydroponics and the aquaponics to grow crops in a vertical stack layers. And right here, we have a real-life snapshot of the vertical farming that I personally took last year from a garden that used the vertical farming on top of a building. So this innovative approach showcased how we can utilize the vertical spaces and cultivate a thriving agricultural ecosystem. Next, which is about the education and awareness. So it's really should be highlighted that the benefit of the green spaces as well as greeneries in developing the urban area, as well as encourage the residents to participate in the sustainable practices. And finally, the team believes that every community is unique with its all needs and preferences. So that's why we're all about bringing all the people together to create a green spaces that truly cater the needs of as many people as possible. So we are talking about the citizen, the community organization, the government organization, and even the experts. So all joining in the planning and the designing process of urban area. It's like a big brainstorming session where everyone ideas and voices and perspective are valued and respected. And now let me introduce Irene from the team who will be presenting on the inequality between the developed and the developing in country in urban development. Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much, Judy, for your valuable, brilliant suggestions. Coming up, we'll explore various solutions and ways to solve issues regarding the implications of urban development. Wait, before I get into the solutions though, I think we need to know what our problems are in the first place, right? Let's do some recap. So to sum up, some countries have indeed benefited from urbanization, which allowed the countries to have more inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable cities and human settlements. In other words, urbanization on a superficial level appeared to perfectly align with the objectives set forth by Sustainable Development Goal 11, which aim to enhance inclusive and sustainable urbanization and capacity for participatory. However, what the majority of the audience tends to miss out on is that many countries that are actually in desperate need of help don't have the access to these new urban developments. For instance, many least developed countries in Africa and even Philippines are suffering from lack of urbanization due to their insufficient economical powers. These led to more and more implications, and somehow this lack of economical leisure led to inequality between the rich and the poor countries. And even the countries that are shying towards urbanization are developing at an extremely slow rate. So at this point, you may ask, hey, so what? So what, Irene? Enough of the problems. What can we possibly do to solve this problem? Well, I believe that we can approach these problems in two different perspectives, which were from the views of the countries/industries and as us, youth, the younger generation. In order to understand the solutions we came up with, however, I believe that it is essential to understand what certified emission reductions are. So by their definition, certified emissions reductions encourages various nations and companies around the world to restrict and reduce the amount of carbon dioxide by a certain amount. Here, carbon credits come into play, which are basically credits or permits that allow the companies, industries, etc., to emit a certain amount of carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gases. This means that carbon credits can also be sold back and forth across different industries and even countries by their needs. This brings us to our first approach to solution, which was about the countries and their industries. When carbon credits are sold back and forth, there are transaction costs. As it could have probably been suggested from the recap, the primary concern regarding the inequality of urbanization of poor and rich countries is the lack of funds/money available to actually carry out their urbanization. Therefore, we suggested that we decrease transaction costs for countries/industries that are willing to donate money to support the urbanization of the countries in need, so as to increase motivation and provide incentives. At this point, you may also ask, but what about us really? Sure, that's an awesome idea, but I'm neither a CEO nor a chief who manages trades between different countries. What can we do as a younger generation living in each of the societies to contribute to this issue? This brings us to my second approach to the solution, which focuses on the approach of youth. How can we as the younger generation do to contribute to this issue? Well, I believe that the primary action we can take is to first establish youth, NGOs, organizations, etc., that focus on strengthening networks with huge companies, Congress, etc. There, with the help from these partners that we made through these organizations, we can then organize various campaigns to spread the matter involving urbanization and raise funds through various forms of fundraisers. Then, we can use these funds to give back and donate to countries in need of urbanization and help them implement strategies to urbanize and develop their countries to ultimately strive towards achieving SDG 11. Moreover, some of the campaigns in the process could be divided into different categories, which are SNS, teaching each other, and etc. So for example, we can utilize SNS or generally teach each other about the matter to raise awareness of inequality being faced in the various areas of the world and voice our opinions. And as more and more ideas are coming and being created as a young group of brilliant students come together to further campaign this matter, I believe that there are more campaigns to be continued. To conclude, we have explored the impacts of urbanization on the environment and inequality between the rich and the poor countries' degree and progress of urbanization in the presentation. Given the solutions provided and applying them in real world, we can certainly strive towards a better urbanized country with a better environment. Let us therefore all come together to make a difference in the world and work towards achieving SDG 11. Thank you, and remember, to go urban is to understand, and some